What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about what Canadians are like during times of war. You know, in general, Canadians have a reputation of being nice, very polite, peaceful people, but apparently, Canadians turn into something completely different in times of war. So today, I'm interested in learning about what exactly that means. So, with that being said, let's take a look.
They didn't always rush enemy positions with bayonets, meat cleavers, and spiked clubs,
Huh?
but were some of the most well-trained and formidable soldiers on any front in any war.
Oh, wow.
In this video, we're going to explore Canadian wartime reputation, keeping our scope focused on World War II and the heroic feats of individual Canadian soldiers therein.
Wow. I mean, this is just such a fascinating topic and something that is not taught or talked about at all, basically, in the United States. Certainly not at all during my, little American history education. We do not learn about Canadian military, Canadian conflicts, or Canada during times of war or anything like that. So this is really fascinating to me, especially because this video is setting up the Canadian military to be this, super badass group of this force to be feared and reckoned with. And I'm not saying that's not the truth. I'm just saying I don't have any sort of perspective or opinion on the Canadian military, both good or bad. So this is kind of the first time I'm hearing about that Canada might kind of scare me a little bit in this video, you know? I didn't know about this side of Canada, but I'm excited to learn about it. A little scared, but let's take a look.
To get the puck sliding, let's move our scope quickly to the First World War, in which the Canadians laid the groundwork for their reputation as shock troopers.
Okay.
Mostly, the troops of the Canadian Corps were known for their savage raids on enemy trenches and their unwritten take no prisoner and kill the wounded policies.
What? What is this? What is this? My whole my whole opinions, my whole perspective on this innocent little peaceful kind Canadians that is completely shattered. What is this? So when Canadians go to war, this was World War I. The Canadian military was known for take no prisoners, even kill the wounded, no survivors. What? Canada? Really? I thought I knew ya. What?
Locked in a stalemate in opposing trenches, the Canadians devised all manner of strategies and weaponry to flip the chessboard upside down and clean up the enemy pieces.
Wow.
Cutting through barbed wire, they crept upon them in the cover of night with painted faces, launching either savage, unforeshadowed raids, or perking up their ears and eavesdropping on enemy plans.
Oh my god. You know, just as a whole general sort of thing, I have to say, we, as Americans, we learn about World War I and World War II and stuff in history class, but we learn about the American perspective of it. So this is just so fascinating, hearing it from the Canadian point of view. It's really interesting, a little scary.
In said raids, the Canadians gorged their bayonets with blood and made good use of improvised melee weapons, paying little attention to attempts at surrender and skewering bandaged and unarmed men just the same as men on their feet with rifles.
Oh my god.
They even concocted an alchemist's shelf of homebrew explosives, like pipe bombs and jam jars loaded with nails and gunpowder.
What?
I think it's a safe bet to say that at least one grenade is made with a maple syrup jar.
Okay, it's weird to have, jokes and be laughing during a video like this. The maple syrup jar kind of got me. But this is no laughing matter, but it is kind of crazy to hear about. I think it's just the juxtaposition of how differently us Americans view Canada compared to what I am learning about right now with this take no prisoners, let's throw jam jars loaded with nails and explosives. It sounds like the Canadian military force in World War I was terrifying. Actually terrifying. What a reputation.
There are also tales of Canadian troops using temporary truces, like on Christmas Day, as a chance to catch their enemy with his stockings on,
No.
sending him grenades instead of Christmas ham,
No.
and bullets through the brain instead of season's greetings.
What the heck? This is so crazy. Like, let's make no mistake, this is war. And some people think, like, anything goes in times of war. But there's literally, like, international laws around war and stuff like that, and rules of engagement, and I don't know if throwing grenades at your enemy while pretending to have a Christmas, a wartime Christmas truce, but instead throwing grenades, not exactly what I was expecting to hear today for Canada's tactics. Oh my god. But again, I don't want to say, like, throw Canada under the bus and say that this is just, like, Canada that did things like this. You know, it's freaking World War I. I'm sure all sorts of nations and countries and all sorts of people were doing whatever they needed to do in order to win the war. That's kind of how it works.
Now, it could be argued that Canadians were acting out of vengeance, but couldn't that argument be used to justify most atrocities in most wars?
Sure.
Canadian Lieutenant R.C. Germain's letter home to his parents makes the revenge excuse about as clear as the sap from a freshly tapped maple tree.
Revenge. So they found this guy's letter home. So Canadians having, like, these really, like, terrifying, like, really aggressive tactics. This is based on the Canadian military wanting revenge on the enemies during World War I. Is that what I'm understanding here?
After losing half of my company there, we rushed them, and they had the nerve to throw up their hands and cry "camarade." All the camarade they got was a foot of cold steel, while I blew their brains out with my revolver.
What?
Despite being a little stab-happy with enemy soldiers, Canadian troops were known for being quite, as we contemporary folk have come to expect, polite to civilian populations.
That's even more scary. That's more scary in a way. That the Canadian military personnel were, like, proper, respectful, polite, nice, kind Canadian people when dealing with civilians and regular people. But as soon as they were in, like, a military conflict, it was a complete change. Like, literally night and day. Like Jekyll and Hyde. Like turning into the Hulk. I don't know how else to say it. This is... that makes it, like, more scary in a way. That Canadians can, like, flip that switch when necessary.
Of the military operations in which Canadians were involved, their ferocity and inventiveness stood out in the Battle of Ortona, the Normandy landings, and the liberation of Belgium and the Netherlands.
Ah, okay.
Through the medieval streets of Ortona, Italy, the Canadians and Germans engaged in brutal room-to-room, hand-to-hand fighting,
Wow.
with the Germans eventually having to withdraw. Here, the Canadians coined the tactic mouse holding, which is basically blowing holes in buildings to allow the passage of infantry rather than running into enemy bullets in the open.
Oh, fascinating. This is so interesting. What a smart tactic as well. Man, Canadians were ruthless and smart. A very deadly combination, literally, in war. But again, this is just so interesting for me. From my American perspective, like, again, I'm only taught the American point of view of World War I and World War II. Hearing this point of view is, like, such a interesting, refreshing, like, view of this whole conflict.
In the D-Day landings, the Canadians landed on Juno Beach, the second most resisted beachhead besides Omaha. The Canadians penetrated further inland than anyone else,
Wow.
coming up against some of the strongest units in the German military.
See, like that kind of thing. That kind of little tidbit, like, I didn't know. During D-Day, the Canadian regiments are the ones that penetrated the furthest into enemy lines. Had no idea.
In Belgium and the Netherlands, the Canadians spent thousands and thousands of Canadian lives to drive the Germans back and get food to the starving civilian populations.
Yeah. I watched, like, a Heritage Minute or something a while back on this specifically. Canada in the Netherlands, and just what an amazing, like, humanitarian story this was. Truly, truly amazing.
They even shared rations with civilians and gave them blankets.
Yeah.
Some of the most intense combat here was in the Battle of Scheldt, where the Allies fought through flooded terrain against stiff German defenses for about a month.
Oh my
This
God.
battle alone cost the Canadians more than 6,000 casualties.
Wow.
This latter triumph, particularly the part about getting food to the starving civilians, is certainly keeping with Canadian tendencies in the First World War.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's the amazing thing. And an important distinction to make. Like, the first part of this video just concentrated on, like, if you cross the Canadian military, if you're on the wrong end of the war, Canadians are going to let you have it and not hold back and actually be quite terrifying. But then, like, the total opposite of that is true at the same time. If you're in need of help, Canadians will be there for you, which is exactly what happened in the Netherlands. Gosh, so fascinating, that dichotomy of Canadians being like the most terrifying and the most friendly. That's the truly amazing part of this video for me.
Though the following atrocity paints a bit of a different picture. Canadian Lieutenant Colonel Frederick E. Wiggle was shot dead on approach to the town of Friseute, Germany, and a rumor spread that it was a civilian sniper from that town who shot him. Back on that revenge train, the Canadians burnt down the entire town, apparently moving its citizens onward before setting their homes on fire.
What is this? Oh my God, yeah, what a reputation to have. Like, if you kill one of our commanders, so we'll move everyone to safety and then blow up your town or burn it down. What on earth was going on during World War II? What the heck?
It was discovered later that Wiggle was shot by German soldiers. Now, the intent of emphasizing Canadian brutality in World War I and mentioning the Friseute incident is not to take away from Canadian bravery in either world conflict. Like I said before, Canadians were some of the most well-trained and formidable soldiers on any front in any war.
That's a great point as well. Like, I gotta point that out too, that Canadians are so obviously extremely well-trained military, very, very effective, very, very good. But yet, for some reason, I don't think for most Americans, even myself, like, the Canadian military today doesn't have that same reputation. People don't know about all this stuff. Maybe it's because this happened so long ago. And thankfully, it's actually a very good thing that, Canada hasn't had to go to war in a long time. So a lot of this stuff has kind of been pushed back into just history, and you have to learn about it. So it's so funny to me how wrong my perception of Canadian military was before this video. I thought, I don't know, I guess I thought the Canadian military must kind of mimic the Canadian culture that Americans think of. Like, oh, friendly, nice, peaceful. And it's like, no, Canadian military, especially during World War I and World War II, were extraordinarily efficient, well-trained, ruthless, got the job done, and more than that even. Pretty amazing, and I'm glad this video's kind of clarifying some of those misconceptions for me. Yeah.
And I think the best way to communicate that is to share some stories involving some of the most heroic Canadian soldiers in World War II.
Oh, okay.
On the 14th of December 1943, Canadian Captain Paul Triquet and his company, supported by an armored squadron...
I'm sorry, I have to... I'm so distracted by that pin on his hat. It's a beaver! There's a beaver! That's so awesome. So Canadian. There's a beaver with a crown pinned to his hat. I just got so distracted by that. Okay.
Tried to cross the gully and take the Casa Berardi, a hamlet on the Orto Orsona lateral, Italy.
Okay.
Under heavy machine gun and mortar fire, Triqueur ran around organizing and inspiring what remained of his men,
Wow.
saying, "There are enemy in front of us, behind us, and on our flanks. There is only one safe place. That is on the objective."
Wow.
Before charging forward and breaking through the enemy line.
Oh, wow.
Triqueur's company and the supporting tank squadron pushed right up to the edge of Casabarari, where he set up defenses and fought off a tank-supported German counterattack with whatever weapons he could find.
Oh my god. Captain Paul Triquet? I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. Basically one of the most badass Canadian captains you've ever heard of. They were surrounded on all sides, and he managed to, like, bring up the morale of his men and find the solution being, we're surrounded on all sides, so the only path is forwards. That's the only thing that could possibly work. That's really awesome.
He held the defensive perimeter against superior numbers until the rest of the battalion came in and
Wow.
relieved the company. Triqueur's
Wow.
utter disregard of danger, his cheerfulness and tireless devotion inspired his men, and his tactical skill and leadership facilitated the capture at a vital point on the Ortona-Rossona lateral.
So it actually worked out. I thought this was going to be like a traumatic story of like sacrifice. No. He was like, no, we're surrounded, but we're winning this thing. And he actually did it. That's amazing. Who is this? This is Major David Vivian Curie.
On the 18th of August 1944, Canadian Major David Vivian Curie was in command of a force of tanks, self-propelled anti-tank guns, and infantry.
Okay.
His task was to block an escape route from the Falaise pocket in the village of Solembert-sur-Diver, Normandy. Curie went in
wow.
alone to scout German defenses and to free the crew of 2 Allied tanks which were previously disabled. Under heavy mortar fire, he succeeded. The Germans then kept throwing counterattacks at Curie and his men until
He ran into enemy. He ran behind enemy lines to help some of his allies get out of broken down tanks while dodging mortar bombs. Basically, just to give you an idea of some of the Canadian heroism during these wars. Wow.
on the 20th, one final German counterattack was thwarted by Curie, costing the Germans some 2,900 casualties.
Wow.
Throughout these 3 days of intense combat, Curie displayed gallant conduct and a contempt of danger, and collected and inspired his men. One of his officers said, "We knew at one stage that it was going to be a fight to the finish. But he was so cool about it, it was impossible for us to get excited."
Yeah, how, to that point, how can you not get inspired when that's your commander? Someone who's literally willing to like run out behind enemy lines to save your brethren in arms. Wow.
Over the 3 days, Curie barely got an hour's sleep, and when it was over, he fell asleep standing and then crashed to the ground.
Oh my
Curie's
God.
courage and devotion to duty had a far-reaching effect on the successful outcome of the battle.
Wow.
Overall, based on the available evidence at least, I think Canadians in World War II abandoned their unofficial take no prisoner and kill the wounded policies of World War I. Obviously, this is a generalization, and the Frieseuter incident certainly demonstrates that they were at least capable of unjust violence. Though there is no comparing.
Okay. So this analysis is really, it's both praising Canadian military and also voicing some criticisms. Like, now the narrator is saying, probably in World War I, Canadian military was like going almost too far, or at least the Canadians in World War I, with like the literal take no prisoners, allow no surrender, bomb people during Christmas. Like, the narrator's saying like that was probably too far, and then Canadians kind of got away from that as time went on. Okay.
The deeds of the Canadians to, say, the Germans, the Japanese, and the Soviets. As evinced by the stories of Paul Triqueur, David Curie, and Leo Major, Canadian courage and formidability was in no short supply, and I believe modern-day Canadians should be proud of how the Canadian military cleaned up their act after World War I and made such a brave and significant contribution to an Allied victory in the Second World War.
Yeah.
Anyways, guys, make sure you let me know.
Wow. Holy cow, that was that was a lot. I didn't know what to expect going into this, but I didn't expect all that. I gotta be honest. That was something else. What a story. Canadians. Oh my god. I'm gonna look at Canadians differently now. I didn't know what you were capable of. But it is war. It is military, and I have a whole new level of respect for the Canadian military. Oh my god. This video was by The Front, and I gotta give this a like, because that was very enjoyable. A bit of a history lesson, and also, like I'm saying, like just a complete 180-degree turn from any misconception I used to have about the Canadian military strength and effectiveness, and I don't know. That was a pretty wild story. I enjoyed that quite a bit, especially like as an American, we have like this view of our military of being like, oh, the biggest and best, badass. We spend the most money on our military. We take a lot of pride in our military and accomplishments on that front. And so it was really, really cool to see that for Canada, see the Canadian perspective on all that, and that I did. That I did, and I have a whole new level of respect, and that was fascinating. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on Canadians during times of war. Anything that you heard here in this video, that'd be fascinating to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada and Canadian culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.